All right, well, welcome everyone to our PATH International Education webinar titled BAIT, Creating a Catchable Abstract. My name is Terry Chase. I'm a member of the Health and Education Committee for about the last 6 years. Our committee works hard every year to review abstracts and get them selected and ready for conference presentation. In my day job, I'm assistant professor of nursing at Colorado Mesa University. I teach in the BSN program and I teach mental health. Welcome to our webinar, BAIT, Creating a Catchable Abstract. One of the reasons why I volunteered to do this is that having been on the committee for several years and reviewing many abstracts, both through PATH and other entities, I find that there are some common problems that people have putting together abstracts. So my intention is to assist you in creating a better and more catchable abstract. On the other hand, I've also been a conference presenter for the last 25 years in various healthcare and PATH conferences. About 99% of my abstracts have been accepted, and I don't say that in a bragging way, but I say that in a way that I think I've found kind of some of the things that might help you be more successful. So let's go. My learning objectives for today are at the completion of this session, participants will have identified components of creating a PATH International Conference presentation abstract. You will have discussed common mistakes when creating and submitting abstracts and distinguished between research, education, and program abstracts. Also, we'll do a quick review of PATH International abstract requirements for conference submissions. But before we get into the nitty-gritty, let's talk about the struggles of conference submissions. And I'm going to talk from my side first. So that would be the reviewers. A lot of times what the Health and Education Committee find in reviewing abstracts is that the purpose or the topic are unclear. Now, one of the things that we'll work with throughout this webinar today is really for you know your stuff, you know your passion, you know your research, you know your program, and you know what you want to present from an education standpoint. But if that is not clearly delineated and lined out and summarized for reviewers, it's hard for us to know. Another problem that gives us headaches is that submitters don't follow directions. So following directions means keeping things concise, keeping things direct, but also a matter of blinding. And we'll get to that in a bit. But basically, this is a very small community in the EAAT field. And so if you put the name of your center or your name or your fellow presenter's name, guaranteed one of us is going to know that. So we really want to keep blinding of the author and the center sure through your abstract. Just so you know, we have over 90 plus abstracts submitted for review. Our committee is about 5 to 6 people, and those abstracts are divided up so that all of us have a load of our own, and then we all look at all of the abstracts as we do final review. Out of that 90 plus submitted, 50 to 55 are accepted. So just to let you know that we put a lot of work, a lot of time throughout the entire spring. Our committee is meeting about twice a month to review abstracts. And in between those meetings, we're reviewing abstracts individually. Now for you, the submitter, I know you have some headaches as well. And one of the things I'd really encourage you to do is be clear about your problem, your topic, or your issue. You know it, you have the passion for it, but let's get it out on paper so that the reviewers know exactly what you're trying to present. Follow the directions, get to the point. So more words oftentimes is not better. Keeping things succinct and consistent and to the point, and making it attractive. And we'll get to the bait part in just a minute, but really what we're trying to encourage you to do is make your abstract attractive so that we want to accept it. I would also suggest that you have your abstract draft read by other people, because once again, you know it so well, sometimes it's hard to see the forest for the trees. So enlist a friend, a family member, and particularly someone who can be honest with you about what they're reading to help you get some good feedback and make it even clearer. So abstract to me is like a piece of bait. So think of creating your abstract as a piece of tasty bait to catch a fish. If the bait is not attractive, then no fish. If the abstract is not attractive, then no acceptance. So if you think about bait and breaking that down into being brief, attractive, informative, and timely, will certainly increase your chances of acceptance. So let's talk about some of the basics. So an abstract is basically a short document that is intended to capture the interest of the reviewer of your proposed presentation. Now, there's a hint here. You must have a clear idea of what you'll be presenting, because the reviewers will be looking at the summary of your intended work. In my years of presenting and my years of submitting abstracts, I knew that I didn't have to have my entire presentation done and ready to go at the time of the abstract submission. Because what I did was I knew in general what I wanted to do. I had the basic components, I had an outline, and I had an idea. But my major work was on putting together a summary of my intended work. Once I was accepted, then reformatted my work to getting that presentation up to speed. So think of it as a tiny piece of bait that you're putting out there that's attractive, clear, and that people really understand what your intended work is. Let's take a look at some standard components of abstract submission. And here's what to expect on the PATH submission document. Basically, we're going to be looking at a title. So you need to have a title that is clear and direct. The abstract is a summary. And I'm going to go through some of the more particulars around our submission process this year as well. You need to be considering learning objectives, which we'll take a look at in a moment. What's your special interest area? Is this a research project? Is this a program that you've created or others have created and you're familiar with and want to share that with others? Is it some kind of education? Once again, we'll get into the particulars of each of these. And then what's your format? So when you submit an abstract for consideration, you also need to be clear about what is the format that you wish to present. So consider these as you think about what you want to submit. All right, let's drill down a little bit more. So the title, and to be honest with you, in my work that I've done, I typically don't even do a title until after I've done everything else. Like I've written my summary, I've gotten my learning objectives, I've looked at the title of the conference and what's the theme of the conference, to help me make sure that my abstract and my title tie into what the theme is. But in the meantime, you may do your title first, you may do your title last, it may just come to you at 3 in the morning. However it does, though, what I would suggest you do is give yourself some creative time. Really brainstorm ideas. I have various methods of creating presentations and classes. One of my methods is called mind mapping, which some of you may be familiar with. But basically, it's creating like a map on a piece of paper of all the things that I think are important and how they connect to the central theme of the presentation. Write down all the words you can think of that have something to do with your presentation. Look at titles of past presentations. I didn't pull any out, but you could certainly do that yourself, especially if you've been to other conferences. You can take a look at some of the titles. What catches your interest? What doesn't? You might look at titles of books or articles of your subject. Make the title interesting. Really try to capture the interest of the reader and make the title easy to remember. Typically, titles are between 12 to 15 words max. I often do a colon. Like in my title of this talk was bait, ... creating a catchable abstract. It kind of breaks it up. It calls attention to the first word and then kind of the next phrase afterwards kind of lets the reader know what's coming up. Make the title easy to remember. Use strong, vivid language. Read your own work out loud. Sometimes hearing what you've just written and bouncing it back to your auditory system may let you know that, well, it doesn't really sound that great. It's not easy to remember. And sometimes just speaking out loud allows other input to happen. Seek perspective. Have a friend or a family member read your title. Now, the abstract, again, is a summary. Make it messy. And what I would suggest you do is you really rough it out. You just write. Write a couple of pages, see how that goes, and then rough out your ideas. In that abstract, in that summary, clearly explain the what. What is it you're trying to present? The idea, the project, the content. possibly provide some background. How did you get to this? And we'll get to some more details in a moment about what PATH is asking you to do. What's the why? What's the purpose of presenting this work? Maybe you've been doing this work for several years. Maybe it's a research project that you've been collaborating with a university or a healthcare system with. You've noticed in your own work that there's a deficit of knowledge or a deficit of skill. And then how did you, and describe how you answered your question. How did you do that? What were some of the mechanics? And once again, this is a summary. This is not your entire presentation. The results, share the information you've collected or learned. Sometimes I call that endnotes, or I call it, you might look at from a research perspective or a program development perspective, best practices. But if you use best practices, make sure you really know that you've got documentation about it being a best practice, not the only practice you know, and so you're going to call it best. Now, you could call it your best practice, but if you state something as best practice in a field, you definitely have to have some backup for that. And then the last thing I'd like for you to consider is, the so what. So state your conclusions and relate it back to the original question, so that your readers know that there's a connection between the what you wanted to present, and the so what, so that you go through your presentation or you go through your description and you relate it back to the original question. Learning objectives. Now, learning objectives were those 4 bullet points that I said at the very beginning of my presentation, and I'll go back to those in just a minute. But basically, this is a required element of this abstract submission. Learning objectives define the expected goal of the session in terms of demonstrable skills or knowledge that will be acquired by a participant as a result of your presentation. So this is about what the learner is going to get, not what you're going to do. This is really about identifying an observable behavioral act or performance of learners, one or more of the 3 domains. Affective, which is feelings or attitudes. Psychomotor is action. What are people going to do, be able to do? And cognitive has to do with the thinking or knowledge. Now, if you want more information about learning objectives and how to find verbs for those, which I'm going to give you a short list in just a moment. Some of you who have been through maybe an educational training program or teachers, you may have heard about Bloom's taxonomy. So you can look up Bloom's taxonomy for a full listing of objectives that could be used for affective, psychomotor, and cognitive areas. But basically, learning objectives are specific, measurable, and clearly stated. So let's take a look at verbs for learning objectives. Those that are communicating knowledge could be started out with define, describe, identify, recognize, and summarize. If your learning objective is about imparting skills, you could use verbs like demonstrate, measure, operate. If you're trying to convey attitudes, you might consider, plan, and reflect. So going back to my learning objectives, upon completion of this session, participants will have identified components of creating, I'm not going to read the whole thing, discussed common mistakes when creating or submitting, distinguished between research, education, and program, and reviewed PATH International abstract requirements for conference submission. So my objectives are about what you're going to have done through the course of this session. So think about yours and which might work best for you. Some words to avoid would be things like putting in understand, because basically what we're trying to do is our learning objectives need to be measurable. So we don't really, how do you measure understand? You can better measure describe, define, or identify. Imparting skills, again, you can measure. Can they demonstrate? Can they measure a certain whatever you're doing? Can they operate? And then certainly conveying attitude. So take a look at those. We're only requiring, I think, a maximum of 3 objectives. So really delineate what your objectives are and what you hope your participants to get out of your session. Now, special interest areas. In the past, PATH has just opened up submissions, and we got what we got. And then a few years ago, we put in a request for research and that there were some requirements. Well, this year, what we've done is to make it easier on you and certainly on the review committee is that we have delineated 3 special interest areas. The first one being research. Basically, what research is a systematic investigation or study of EAAT issues. These projects are usually associated with a university or a healthcare system and professionals that are skilled and practiced in research. One of the things that we require when someone submits a research proposal is that they indicate that they have investigated whether it needs IRB approval. And IRB approval is Institutional Review Board, which is to protect the rights and welfare of human subjects involved in research activities being conducted under its authority. So I'm not going to go into the details of that right now, but for those of you who are considering research projects, and typically we're looking for research projects that are associated with a university or a healthcare system. And if you're doing research with either in conjunction with either of those bodies, you will know about IRB. So go ahead and make sure that you check those boxes, that if you have IRB approval, if it's in process or it's not needed, that is a requirement of submitting a research proposal. Another special interest area that you might consider is programs. And programs are information that supports professionals in developing EAAT programs. What have you developed or experienced? So for those of you who have created a veterans program, for those of you who have created a working with horses program for breast cancer survivors, or a hippotherapy program for kids with autism or cerebral palsy, and you want to share how you developed that program, what were some of the components of it, what were your best practices, and what you want to share, you would put your submission under programs. Education would be for information focused on supporting EAAT professionals in areas of equine management, teaching skills, and disability-specific information. Another way to look at this is think continuing education. What, as an EAAT professional, do you want to provide and promote for other professionals in the field? So think continuing education. Some of you may have been to my sessions. The last few years, I've done sessions on disability-specific information for working with people with spinal cord injury. And I gave a lot of background information. I gave vocabulary. I gave some safety issues, and I gave some of the emotional components of working with that specific disability group. For each submission, you could only pick one of these areas. So you can't say, well, my abstract is really a combination of research and education. No, it needs to be, you need to decide which category are you going to submit that abstract for: research, programs, or education. Now, what delivery method do you wish to present? Now, this is always another one. As a reviewer, we get people who check all the boxes, and then we're supposed to decide what they want to do. So really, we want you to decide, and some of this information will maybe help you with that. So a delivery method is, how do you wish to present your information? And forgive me, I know some of you who are listening are probably experienced conference presenters. You've maybe submitted several times in the past. So forgive me if this is repetition, but I think it's also really good that we're trying to promote new submissions to the conference. We're trying to promote and increase the professionalism of our folks. And so we provide this for everyone. So basically, a poster is a static presentation of your work. And that is a format that's usually on, there are poster programs that you can get your information out on. Sometimes people put them on a 3-sided cardboard, folding cardboard kind of thing. We're looking for professionally done posters, so making it the best you can is important. So a poster is static. The poster sessions are set up, the posters are set up throughout the entire conference, and then poster presenters are then asked to, and I believe even required, to be at their posters at specific times to entertain questions and discussion with conference attendees as they go around and take a look at your poster. It's a really good way to provide your information. It's succinct. It's fairly easy. This is probably a really good entry level way. If you've never done a conference presentation before, but you feel very strongly about what you'd like to do, this is a really great way because it helps you really focus your information, and you don't have to talk in front of 50 or 100 people, but you can do a small group of 3 or 5, whoever comes by your poster. So the poster is a really good way. When you're thinking about your delivery method, though, I really want you to consider how to best connect your presentation to the audience. And what's your comfort level? So if your comfort level is, I can stand by a poster, for an hour or 2 during the conference and talk to small groups of people, then that's the choice you want to make. If you are more into lecture, and lecture sounds a little harsh. I would really like to have that. You'd be thinking about a lecture being more about a teaching session or a presenting session, where you like to be up in front of a large group of people. And our conference sessions, I've seen, well over 100 people at the small breakout sessions. I've also seen smaller groups of 30. So if you're comfortable with that, then that might be the way that you want to go. Typically, the lecture presentation sessions also have some type of visual with it. So a PowerPoint presentation is good. It helps people connect with what you're saying, and it helps you be able to put up either pictures or bulleted information that people can glean more information from. Experiential or hands-on, this is more interactive, and discussion and panel discussion. Now let me just kind of group lecture, experiential, hands-on, and discussion together. So you could actually check multiple boxes here. Lecture, you wanted to have a kind of an experiential part of it or a hands-on element of your session. Discussion to me is, discussion with you as the presenter, or you could also look at your facilitating small group discussions within your session. So you could check all 3 of those together. A panel discussion, typically that is several presenters that have 10 to 15 minutes each within a time block of about 60 to 75 minutes. So perhaps you and several other people in your world would like to put an abstract together that is a panel discussion on program development, and each presenter would have 10 to 15 minutes, and they would be talking about or presenting a certain aspect of your overall idea. Now, I will tell you that the Health and Education Committee, sometimes we see multiple abstract submissions of a similar topic or a same topic. And so what we've done is we've taken it upon ourselves to invite those presenters to present on a panel discussion. And I think it's been received favorably. It gives more people an opportunity to share their knowledge, information, and passions. And it also helps kind of push everything together, because one of our feedbacks from conference attendees is that they go to session, and it's like, well, it's kind of like the same thing over and over again. So help us really focus and bring those topics together and present possibly, maybe it's not just your own center, but maybe of others out in the country, and you guys would want to get together and put together a panel discussion presentation. So pros and cons of each, again, I've sort of alluded to those. Poster is a static presentation where you stand by your poster for, you're designated to be there at certain times during the conference. You talk to people as they come by. Sometimes we have it connected with the wine and cheese thing, which makes the conversation flow a little bit easier for both the poster presenter and the attendees. Lecture is more of a teaching, presenting to large groups. You can certainly incorporate experiential and hands-on and interactive parts of that. You could have a discussion with you and the audience, or small group discussion, and then a panel discussion, which actually allows more people to be involved. Educational setting. So this is another thing we really like you to think about is where do you wish to present? Now, posters, you don't really have a choice in this. If you select poster, then your poster will be designated in a certain area, and then you'll be assigned times to stand by your poster. Lecture hall, again, to me, that's a conference room. And hotel conference rooms, have come in different configurations. Typically with AV access, or always with AV access, and we do require that presenters bring their own laptops. So you would, if you're going to be doing a lecture hall or a conference room, you would be doing a PowerPoint presentation. You could facilitate a large and small group discussion within that room itself. If you're going to choose a lecture hall or a presentation, a teaching session, and an arena stable setting, meaning that your information is presented in your lecture hall or presenting room, and then you move to an arena or a stable setting, which then allows for hands-on participation or observational offering. Now, I've done this at Region 10. I did a interactive. I did a session entitled, I can't remember the title, but it was something like Circles of Wholeness, using the mandala in working with horses. And I did a short, like 20 or 30-minute discussion, lecture, teaching presentation in a classroom, and then we moved out to the outdoor areas to be around the horses, and we continued our session there. So that was kind of a lecture hall, arena, stable setting combo. Another one that you could select would be an arena stable setting only. So you do a demonstration. There's still capability for you to talk with and present to your attendees or your participants, but it's probably more for a session that you would be demoing a type of activity with horses. You might invite or allow participation. Once again, we're not going to get into the details of that, but just to give you an idea. So you might select that if you want to be out in the arena or in the stable only. But really what I'd like you to consider is how do you best connect your presentation with the audience? And to me, I'm always in favor of more experiential, because we learn best when we have more sensory input. So if you didn't know it, just listening to this, you're going to retain 20%. If you listen and you read, you're going to retain maybe 40 to 50% of the information. But if you listen, read, and actually do, so put this into practice, you're going to be able to retain 80% of the information presented. So consider that for what you want to do, and what's your comfort level and how best to connect with your audience. The next thing for you to decide, there's a lot of decisions in all of this, I know. But how long do you wish to present? Again, consider your presentation. Is less than 45 minutes, 45-minute session appropriate? 45 minutes to an hour, so 45 to 60 minutes. Is it more of an hour plus session, or is it a half-day workshop? So again, thinking about your comfort level, what is your experience, and what do you want to do? I think one of the things to think about is if you're going to do a 45-minute session, say it's a presenting lecture type of thing, and you're going to be talking most of the time and inviting a few questions, that might be a great one, a great selection for you. If you're 45 minutes to an hour and you want to invite people to be in small group discussions or actually work through a problem, that might be the length of session for you. Hour plus session would certainly be for more experiential or participation sessions. And a half-day workshop, typically those are pre-conference workshops where there's high participation, high knowledge, and experience shared. So again, where's your comfort level and what's the best way for you to connect? Now, just so you know, as the conference is being created and the sessions are being slotted in, we have certain time slots that we need to fill. So we really, and those are regulated by the folks in the office and the conference team. So you can submit what you want, and we'll certainly do the best to provide that. But just know that some of that stuff is regulated, and we're kind of limited to what we're given. There we go. There's our time frame. So less than 45 minutes, 45 minutes to an hour plus session, or a half-day workshop. Again, think about what you want to do, what's your comfort level, and how best to connect with your audience. Okay, so the submission procedure is this. The link will be opened up on February 14th. You'll click on that link. You'll need to log in to get started. Presenter names and contact information, your experience in EAAT, your PATH International presenting experience, your intended audience, your special interest area, specific information for your interest area. Now, one of the things I would certainly suggest is that you put all this information in a Word document. You work on your draft, you work on your final draft, you get everything ready to go so that all you have to do when you open up the submission link is cut and paste. Because this could be a disaster if you haven't done any of this before you go to this link and open it up. So seriously, put it in a Word document, really get it fine-tuned, ready to go so that all you have to do is cut and paste. So what we will also want you to have is a title, an abstract, which is a summary paragraph. You will have learning objectives, presenter or presenter biography, and keep this anonymous. Please do not put your name. Please do not put your center's name, because again, this is a small community, and people will kind of know who you are just by saying, the title of your or the name of your center or your program area. A brief description for the brochure and your audience, the delivery method, education setting, and time frame. Now let me go back to audience, because I think so basically what we're going to want you to do is let us know who is this appropriate for, and there's a big long list. So let me grab my list and get to that. So your primary audience, you can select administrators, and once again, select as many as you want, but I wouldn't select all of them. Really think about what is your presentation geared toward. So administrators, executive directors, program managers, volunteer managers, equine managers, barn managers, mental health professionals, occupational or physical therapists, speech therapists, board members, volunteers, and so on. So really take a look at what audience is going to benefit most from this. Let me back up just for a moment. Okay. So at the bottom of this slide, special interest area. So that would be the research, program, and education. In addition to a summary abstract, a small, a paragraph that summarizes the who, what, why, where, so what, all of that, we're going to be asking you some specific questions. I'm not going to go into detail about that because you can find those when you select your special interest area. And what those questions are for you to really have an opportunity to, again, drill down and be specific about your submission. It also gives the reviewing committee more information about what it is you are intending to present. So you'll need an abstract summary. You'll need to go through those particular questions. You'll need to provide learning objectives, biography, a brief description for the brochure. And that's basically what all I ever do is I take my abstract summary and I just reduce it. I cut it in half. I really just try to get to the, it's kind of like a marketing thing. What's going to let people know what my presentation is about, who it's for,